Alrighty, so at 6:31, I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Eric Bennis. I'm one of the financial advisors here at John Graham and Associates. If this is your first time ever joining one of these presentations, just so you know, every month we do an educational seminar. Some months it's on Social Security, for example. We also do them on estate planning, which is another important topic, general retirement readiness, and all the facets of that conversation, additional conversations like college savings, things like that. So if this interests you, or if you have other topics that you want to learn more about, we do ongoing education each month on those things. Today, we're going to talk about Social Security and some key important things to know about that. I would like to frame the conversation, at least from my point of view on this. The way that I think of Social Security is, I know some people come in and they say, either I'm overwhelmed, I don't know where to start, I don't know how to make the right decision, and it can be kind of a daunting conversation. But to me, it's an exciting conversation because if you can start to visualize what Social Security is going to look like for you and start to ask those questions of, what do I need to know? That means you're almost at the finish line, right? You've worked many years, you've had a long, productive career, hopefully a fulfilling career, right? And now you're at that point where you get to think about, hey, when I have more time to myself, when I'm retired and I get to pursue my hobbies and the things that I care about, what is that going to look like? So to me, that's an exciting conversation. Now, it's an important one. We have to get it right, of course, but it's fun to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Okay. And tonight we're going to talk about some of the important things to consider. And honestly, part of our goal is, again, obviously provide education, but also to illuminate some of those blind spots, right? It's not necessarily that every single thing that we talk about is going to pertain to your situation, but there might be something that we bring up that you never thought of. And that's, to me, the value of these things is you know what the high points are that you need to have your bases covered when you do enter retirement, or at least start drawing Social Security in your 60s. So I think we all know this, but this is going to be somewhat generalized. Don't quite take it as advice, but definitely if this is an interest of yours, or if you've got specific questions and concerns, reach out because we can provide specific advice. We prefer to do it on a one-on-one situation though, keep it confidential, of course. But literally a couple weeks ago, I had somebody come in with I think they thought it was fairly complicated case. They said, listen, I'm still working, but I've heard you can take Social Security kind of early, and I'm thinking of doing that because my thought process is, I take Social Security early, I get a reduced benefit, I invest that money, my investment return provides an even better benefit than if I had waited and got more older on in life. And so it was a good premise that he came up with, but then we did the math for him and ran the scenario and said, okay, based on, this analysis, you should or you shouldn't. So those kind of things are very intricate, and it's good for those one-on-one situations, which is why we're here. But tonight we're going to focus more on the broad ideas, and if that sparks some type of thought in your mind similar to what this guy had, then great, reach out and we'll help you work through that and walk through the math. So tonight we want to cover some basic assumptions, make sure we're all on the same page of how retirement situations are going to look going forwards. Talk about some individual benefits. Now, a lot of people don't necessarily stop working, quote unquote, right away. They might stop working 40 hours a week. They might stop working at a job that's very strenuous and go into something that they, really enjoy. But that's something that we see more and more, and realistically, it's probably going to increase. Spousal benefits, the pension impact, depending on who you work for. Caterpillar has a pension, but the United States Post Office also has a pension. The way that they interact with Social Security is very different from one another. And of course, we encourage you to do comprehensive financial planning because if you make every decision in a vacuum, there's a good chance that the outcomes do not line up the way that you want. So we want it to all be one good plan that's married together, provides for you, provides for your spouse, provides for your goals, and if it's important to you, provides for the next generation as well. So tonight, we're going to talk about Social Security in the context of retirement. I know that there's SSI, there's SSDI. Those are for people with special needs or disabilities. And as somebody who, I have a family member, my brother is special needs. We're definitely involved with that. Plenty of clients that we work with have special needs. We work with their guardians. That is a different realm of Social Security. We're going to focus on the retirement side tonight. If you have questions specifically about that, we can also discuss that, but that's not the main topic for today. So what we're thinking of is the monthly payment, taxable income from the government, normally comes in every month. Some of it gets taken out for Medicare, potentially Medicare Part B, Part D, etc. So let's think of how this fits into the whole picture. We've got two pictures here, 1983 and today. Back in the 80s, if you were to pick a random S&P 500 company, that's the 500 largest corporations in America. In the late 80s, about 60% of those companies offered pension plans. Nowadays, less than 20%, it's closer to 15% offers pension plans. So because of that, you have to take on some personal responsibility for growing that additional money beyond Social Security and retirement. It used to be kind of you had your government pension, i.e. Social Security, and you had your corporate, your job pension. Now, Social Security, as long as things stay the way they have been, and we expect that they will, should always be there. The government is going to continue in perpetuity. The pension situation is honestly not guaranteed because pensions can fail, companies can fail. There's often a lot of fail safes there to protect them, but they're not quite as guaranteed, I guess, as Social Security in a lot of situations. But the fact is the pension setup was very nice because you went to work, even if you weren't necessarily the best with money or the best saver, a certain amount of your money was going into that pension, and you're going to get it back on a monthly basis. Same way Social Security works. Nowadays, you see that nest egg, quote unquote, is the huge block of money, which nest egg is meant to encompass checking account, savings account, IRAs, 401ks, any type of socking money away for the future. And what's interesting about these things is pensions and Social Security are the types of money that often you cannot get at in a lump sum. You can't make a bad financial decision about it all at once. The pension pays you every month. If you spend it all on day one, you're still going to get next month's payment. Same with Social Security. Nest egg, you have to be very careful. That's partially why financial advisors exist, because you could spend it down too fast. You could run out before before you pass away or before it goes to the next generation. So it requires a lot more hands-on management than the past. Another thing to think about when we talk about when do we take Social Security? Just like a pension, Social Security is not a generational type of wealth. A nest egg, let's say it's a savings account, is generational. If you don't spend your savings, it'll go on to the kids, if that's how you want it, or it'll go to a charity, or however you want it to pass on. If you don't use your pension, if you don't, if you're taking Social Security and you pass away, yes, your spouse can benefit, but the next generation is not going to benefit from that. It's going to cut off, and they need to go on their own record and start their own Social Security collection. It's not going to pass on from you directly to them. So that's a really important thing to keep in the back of your head throughout our conversation tonight, is that we're not talking about generational wealth. We're talking about a pension that stops when you pass away. There's an exception for your spouse, of course, but not for the kids. So this is the type of money, unlike your nest egg, that is not intergenerational. The first thing that we want to acknowledge is the fact that Social Security came out of the Great Depression as a social benefit system. And the assumption at the time was people will die between 65 and 70 years old, because honestly, that was the statistic at the time. People aren't dying at the same point, which, we won't get into the political discussion of it, but that, of course, stresses the whole system when you have people living longer and taking more money. But it also impacts the math of when should I take this, right? Do I take it early for less, or do I take it later for more? When am I going to pass away? Nobody knows that. So we have to make an educated guess and an educated decision on when we take these funds. Statistically, if you can make it to 65, you can make it way beyond 65. A lot of people are going to live into their 90s, which not only impacts Social Security, again, think back to that nest egg picture. That means your nest egg doesn't need to last 10 years. It needs to last, if you retire at 65 and you live to be 95, that's 30 years. On top of your Social Security payment, potentially a pension payment if you're still part of that pension generation. You need to have a nest egg that's responsibly managed with the proper asset allocation, et cetera, to get you all the way to 90, 95 years old. Now, the way that this plays into Social Security is there's going to be a point at which mathematically you're going to collect more money. If you take it at 70 versus 62, you just have to live long enough. So we'll take a look at that here today. This is a printout of, if you go to SSA.gov, SSA.gov is Social Security Administration.gov. If you log in, you can print out something that looks pretty much like what's on the screen here. I know there's a lot of numbers, but what we really care about as financial planners is the bar chart that you see on the right here. See, it goes from 62 up to 70. These are the typical age ranges in which you can have access if you're not a widow. So because of that, we can have an estimation of what you're going to get. It is an estimation, and it is based on your average out of your highest earning years, but this is really valuable in financial planning. What we don't like to see is somebody come in when they're 65 and say, I'm going to retire next week. What can you do for us? Right? That's very difficult to deal with. If you can get this bar chart years before you think of retiring, let's say you're 3 years out still, then you can have an estimation of, okay, I think I want to take it at 65, but should I retire and wait till 67? That's a good question. And that's what, we're here for, is to answer those types of questions. If you've been working at all, you're going to have a Social Security record. You could be 40 years old, right? You're still going to have a record and you can access this stuff. It won't necessarily be the most accurate because of the way that averages work. Of course, by the time you hit 62, your average is going to be different. But it's great to be proactive, and we would encourage you, go on SSA.gov, get your numbers, and treat it as a starting point for the whole conversation. This slide is basically a chart of what your full retirement age is. Once you got the information, you got it. It's not super important. It's just good to know, depending on when you were born, that's when your full retirement age is. But let's talk about full retirement age and what that means. Full retirement age does not mean maximum benefit. I don't want to call it arbitrary, but we're going to say that. It's an arbitrary number set by the government that they call full retirement age when you get your quote unquote full benefit. However, you have the choice to wait beyond full retirement age and not just get your full benefit, but get an increased benefit. So full retirement age can be a little bit confusing for most people. These days it's 67. They keep pushing it back, again, because people keep living longer. They're trying to get as many people to wait as possible. It reduces the stresses on the system. But what I would do if I was you, if you're born before 1960, just take a mental picture, write down what your full retirement age is. That's a good thing to know. So what if you don't want to wait till full retirement age? In this scenario, the hypothetical person, their full retirement age is 66 years old. So that means this person was born before 1954 in this example. They can take it at 62. If you take it at 62, you're going to get a reduced benefit. So if you're going to get $1,000 a month and you take it at 62, you're going to get $750 a month. Something to note is if you happen to be a widow, you're able to take it at 60. Your benefit is reduced, but you do have access to the money sooner. That's not on the chart because that's not the majority of people, but that is there. So the thought is, if you take it earlier, well, you're taking less money, but you're getting more years, right? Would you rather have 75% or $750 every single month for an additional 4 years? Or would you rather wait and get $1,000 a month, taking it at 66? That's where some of the analysis comes in. And we're going to go through an example here, but we definitely have software. Most financial planners should have software, but we certainly do, where you plug in your various numbers and it tells you when it's mathematically most advantageous for you to take Social Security. So let's think about, what if we wait past full retirement age? Let's say we really love our job, we don't want to retire, or, we're just really prioritize maximizing that Social Security draw. Every year that you wait, you get an 8% raise. If you wait till you're 71, you're not helping anybody there. The raises stop at 70, so definitely take your Social Security by the time you hit 70. But you can see that you get significantly more if you're able to delay. And again, that's something to think about, because think about the typical American going into retirement. They're going to have a few types of money. They're going to have their Social Security. They're probably going to have some type of retirement plan through their job. Let's call it a 401k or a 403b or something similar. And they're going to have a certain amount of cash savings. And they're going to have life expenses, not to mention inflation. By the time they're 90, bread is going to cost $10 a loaf. So when they look at Social Security in the context of those other funds, you got to think about, what would I rather spend first? I could spend my Social Security last and get 132% of my full retirement age payment amount. If going back to our example, if you were going to get $1,000 a month at full retirement age, well, now you get $1,320 a month. That sounds like a good deal. But if you retired sooner than 70, say you quit at 65, but you waited to take Social Security until 70, you've probably been spending down your 401k because you need to come up with your money from somewhere. Now, 401k money is generational money. If you don't use it, that can go to your spouse, that can go to the next generation, that can be donated. The point is that nobody's going to take it away from you. It's really your money. Social Security is not generational money. So if you're waiting till 70, yes, you will get an increased amount, but you will have spent down your 401k or your IRA, meaning that the next generation or potentially your spouse receives less funds because you've drained that while waiting for your Social Security. So it's some things to be thoughtful about. It's not always a math thing. Math plays into it, but it's also a values thing. If you never had kids, if you're never married, that legacy component might not be super important to you. If you have a child with special needs and you're very concerned with the fact that I want to make sure they're provided for, I want to maximize the amount of generational assets that can be there for them, then that's going to play into your decision making here. So here's an example of somebody in their different breakpoints, right? How long do I have to live before it was quote unquote worth it from a pure dollars standpoint for choosing to take it at one age versus another? So the first number that we come to right above the number 76 on the x-axis says age 62 versus 66, age 76. That means that if I'm going to take my Social Security at age 62, and I'm comparing that to the option of taking it to 66, it would be more worth it for me to take it at 66 as long as I live past 76. If I were to die at 75, I would have collected more dollars from the government by taking it at 62 years old. Not that we deal with this a lot, but if you're in a position where you might not make it as far, that's a definite sign that you might want to take it earlier. Now, don't confuse that with being humble, because we have a lot of people who say, I'm lucky if I make it to 80, right? And they make it to 95. But if you truly know that there's something going on in your family where you're not going to make it, that's a consideration. The next one is 70 versus 62. If you're going to wait the maximum amount of time, and you're comparing, waiting all the way till 70, which is the most amount of benefit that you could get, 132% of your benefit, versus 62, which would be that reduced about 75% of your total benefit. Then you have to live to be almost 80 years old. 79 is your break point, so you need to make it to there. And then lastly, you have to live into your 80s in comparison between 70 and 66, taking it at 70 versus 66. These are going to be different for everybody. That's why You go to SSA.gov, you get that bar chart that we talked about, you bring it to your advisor, and then we'll run the scenario. We've got software that does this, and it gives you the hard numbers. And then from there, you can have that more values-based conversation of, right, it maximizes my dollars, but I only get 2,000 more. Is it worth it? Maybe I should take it sooner and preserve my 401k, right? It's not that the dollar amounts are necessarily going to be vastly different. It's just that it's more. I've run these scenarios before where the difference between taking it at 64 versus 66 was a difference of like $3,000, right? But that's 2 years of living. That's 2 years of draining their 401k. To them, it was a no-brainer. Yeah, I'll give up $2,000 in the aggregate and preserve $30,000 in my 401k. So it depends. You got to know your full picture. That's why you don't just talk about Social Security in a vacuum. You talk about it in the context of all of your assets. So a few things to consider, especially the one on the left. Are you actually retiring, quote unquote? A lot of people will retire and then they'll be, I don't know, a Walmart greeter, or they'll work at the golf course as a starter, getting you your keys to your golf cart, that type of thing. That's enjoyable work, but it's still payable, right? If you're collecting a paycheck, that's going to impact your Social Security, which is why we have to talk about it. Longevity, we kind of just talked about that and how that's going to impact your numbers. And then spouses. Again, Social Security is not a generational type of money, but it is the type that the spouse can get some benefit. But once you and your spouse are gone, then it's done. Full retirement age, going back to that FRA on the left side, is an acronym for full retirement age. Remember, if you're born after 1960, your full retirement age is 67 years old. So what this chart is saying is if you're under full retirement age, if you are less than 67, if you're 66 or younger, we'll call it, you can work, but you need to make less than 22,320 a year if you're choosing to collect Social Security at the same time as you're working. If you make over 22,320, then you're going to get penalized. So let's say you took Social Security at 62 and you're making 100 grand a year. Well, you're about 78 grand over the limit. So you're probably not even going to get any benefit at this point. So that's why you can't really double dip until you hit full retirement age. When you hit 67, it goes up to 60 grand, which covers a whole lot of people. It's not a concern for a lot of people. Once you actually hit that month of your full retirement age, then you're good to go. So the reason it says year you reach full retirement age, right? Your birthday might be in August, and technically, right, during January, February, March, etc., you're not technically full retirement age yet. So this is something else. This goes back to that example I opened with of somebody who came in to our office and said, I have an idea. I'm going to take a reduced benefit and keep working. I want you to take that reduced benefit and invest it for me. And I'll bet you that we can, do better than I would have gotten in terms of return if I had just waited and taken it later. Well, we ran the scenario and he got a good amount of Social Security, but after his reductions because of his penalty of still working, he would have made about $100 a month before tax, of course. That didn't make sense. Ultimately, we said, no, that's not in your best interest. You shouldn't do that. Good idea, but the math of it doesn't work. So that's something to consider, because you don't want that reduction. But to be very clear, the reduction is temporary. If you are working and taking Social Security, you get your reduction in the year that you earn too much. But the year you stop working or the year that you hit full retirement age, your benefit jumps up. It's going to be your full benefit. So it's not like this is a permanent ding to your Social Security record. It's just that you're going to make less in the year that you earned above the 22,320 limit. And once you reach full retirement age, for most people 67, you can make $1 million and collect your Social Security, and there's no problem. This is a quick example just to show the math of it. So John's 62 years old, definitely below retirement age, full retirement age. He earns 25 grand a year. And remember, our limit is 22,320. So he's over that. He's about 26, almost 2,700 bucks over the earnings threshold. So he's going to get that 2-for-1 reduction, meaning going back to this, for every $2 that you earn over the limit of 22,320, you're going to get $1 of your Social Security paycheck withheld. So if you're literally only $2 over, you'll only lose $1 benefit. But in this case, he's 2680 over, so he's going to get 1340 reduced. So instead of getting his proposed annual benefit, he went on SSA.gov, he got his bar charts, it said, John, at 62, you're going to get $12,000 annually. Well, that bar chart didn't account for the fact that he's going into work. So he's actually just going to get 10,660. Now, hypothetically, if John quits his job, next year he's still collecting. He's 63 years old now, but he started collecting back at 62. John's going to get all $12,000 because that penalty only applies in the year that you were working and earned too much. So you are free to change your mind. We don't necessarily see this a whole bunch because our goal is to have a good plan, do it right from the beginning. But if you have a change of heart or a sudden change of situation, unforeseen, you can always say, hey, I started a record with the Social Security Administration. I took my benefit at 62. I'm now 64 and I want to pause that. I don't want that to go against my record and I want to accumulate more time. Because remember, if you don't take it at 62, you get that increase until your full amount at 67 for most people. And then you get that 8% raise beyond 67 until you hit 70. If you really wanted to, you could take it early and then pause your record. And so the amount that you took it early, it would count against you, but that extra time when it's paused would accumulate in your favor. And so when you turned it back on, you would have an increased benefit from when you first started. So that is an option. If you're at that point where you already started and you were attending tonight's seminar because you said, hey, I'm not sure if I made the right decision, this is something that we can talk about. I don't see it happen a lot, but in some circumstances, it's the right thing. Just so you know, it is going to be taxable. Everything in life is taxable. Now, one good thing about Illinois, there are plenty of things to criticize in Illinois, but one good thing about being a resident of Illinois when you're retired is that Illinois is not going to tax your Social Security benefits. They'll take your income at 4.95%. They'll take super high property taxes, but they won't tax your Social Security benefits, nor will they tax your 401k withdrawals. So that's one nice thing. That doesn't apply to other states. There are some states that reflect what Illinois does, but most states are going to go ahead and tax your Social Security as well. But the point of this is basically your provisional income is going to include everything. It includes capital gains, it includes dividends, it includes all the special stuff that it's, not just regular old income on a W-2, it's a special kind of income, it's counted. So you're going to be taxed. Now, it is a sliding scale, right? If your provisional income is very low, you potentially might not be taxed. But for most people, for most Americans, they're going to pay some. And you can see the charts there at the bottom between 25 and 34, 50% taxable, above 34,000, 85% of your benefit is taxable. Now, if you're married, and you both have Social Security records, then you're both eligible to claim Social Security benefits, but you don't have to claim them independently. If you were a doctor, and you're married to, I don't know, somebody with a lower earning potential, maybe custodian, something like that, the doctor is probably going to have a very high potential Social Security draw, and somebody in custodial work might have a lower Social Security draw. Technically speaking, the husband and the wife in this scenario could go on their own records and take their own numbers. The wife, or the husband, depending who earned more, is entitled to 50% of the spouse's social security amount, though. So I'm married. Let's say in the future, my social security benefit is $2,000 a month, and my wife's is going to be 750, hypothetically. Instead of taking 750, she could take my 2,000 divided by 2, because she's the spouse, and so she gets 1,000, which is better than she would have done on her own. So that's nice. And we encounter a lot of people who, whether it's them not knowing it or just making sure they fill out the paperwork correctly to do the Social Security claim, where instantly that's one way of improving their situation, getting them a little bit more money. Now, one thing to know is you're not going to claim early, right? You have to wait until the spouse whose record you're comparing your 50% to actually files. So if there's a custodian and a doctor and the custodian wants to take 50% of the doctor spouse's benefit, the doctor needs to be the one to file first. Additionally, let's say your spouse passes away, you're able to absorb your spouse's Social Security benefit for yourself. You're not able to keep both. You have to pick, do I want my record or do I want the survivor benefit equal to the amount that my spouse received, 100% of what my spouse received. So in this example, we've got Gary and we've got Amy. So in this case, well, the math lines up pretty well with the example that I provided, but Amy would not have gotten as much she would not have gotten as much on her own as she would get by going 50% of Gary's record. By going 50% of Gary's record, she ends up with $1,000, which is a good deal. And on my screen, we've got a few pop-ups. I'm hoping that you guys as viewers don't have the same pop-up, but this is assuming that they take it at full retirement age 66. Now, there are scenarios where there's a little bit of strategic planning involved, saying, I want, as the higher earning spouse, I want to take mine sooner, and then I want my spouse to delay and take hers later on. Or in much more complex situations, if there's a widow involved, there are instances where the widow would take this the survivor benefit and then move on to her own record later on in her 60s in order to maximize the amount of dollars that she collects. That's a little more complex, and I don't have an example for that, but we can run the scenario for it. Survivor benefits are treated pretty much the same way as we've been talking about, where there's a reduction. Like I mentioned, widows can take it at 60 versus 62 for everybody else. When I say widows, I mean widows and widowers. And if they take it early, there's going to be that reduction. There is the carve out for people who are responsible for others who have some type of disability. So you see that here, exceptions for surviving spouse with children who are under 16 or have a disability. Some people have gotten divorced, and there's still some type of quote unquote spousal benefit to that whole situation. Essentially, the question to ask is, are you under 60 or are you over 60? If you're under 60 and you're single, then you should be fine. Just don't remarry if you're planning to do that until you're over 60. If you're over 60, well, I guess in any scenario, if you got remarried and you're under 60, you're not going to be on that record of that divorced spouse. You're on the new record with your new spouse. That's if you're under 60 years old. If you're over 60 years old and you get remarried, there's a potential that you can still claim those benefits as a survivor. It can get a little complicated, but that's why we do the seminar, because we want to introduce these ideas to you. If this applies to you, obviously we'll dive into it deeper, but these are things to think about, have on your radar. Other things to have on your radar: government pension offset and windfall elimination provision. Like I mentioned earlier, there's Caterpillar people who have Caterpillar pensions. There are United States Post Office workers who have post office pensions. There are teachers. In Illinois, we have the Teacher Retirement System, TRS. The main difference between those is that they're public versus private pensions. Public pensions view it as double dipping if you try to get their pension plus Social Security. There's going to be some type of reduction, essentially. Some people have it reduced to zero Social Security, all pension. Some people will get a very small amount of Social Security in relation to the pension. The other way that this plays into planning, decision making, things like that, is when somebody passes away, right? If you had a teacher who got just TRS, and then you had, I don't know, a construction worker, right? And they're collecting their Social Security, and then either one of them could pass away. How does the construction worker now interact with TRS receiving that benefit? If they get 50% of their deceased spouse's benefit, that's going to come off of their Social Security, versus if the construction worker dies first and the teacher wants to get some of that Social Security, how is that reduced? The two are going to cancel each other out. Normally, what we see is the pension is going to take precedence. You're going to collect your pension before you collect the Social Security. They're going to offset each other. But it's something to think about in terms of your planning for if a spouse is gone, because we don't want to enter retirement planning with the assumption that both people are alive right up to the very end, and then poof, they magically, go on the same day. Realistically, there's probably going to be one who passes first. And so we want to make sure that that benefit lines up with their lifestyle and is able to sustain their lifestyle after both incomes go away and you're just down to the one income. So what we would encourage you to do, I guess some takeaways here: go to SSA.gov, get your bar chart. That's important. That's a good starting point. If you're part of a public pension, gather some information on that. What are you going to be eligible for? How many more years do you have to work? Some of those things, especially the teacher system, they're going to want you to work 35 years. There's different tiers for teacher systems, teacher retirement system. There's tier 1, there's tier 2, they've even got tier 3 now. It's all based on hire date. So start exploring those things because they're going to interact with your Social Security situation. It's not on here, but I would encourage you to gather statements of your 401k and statements of your other accounts, whether it's an investment account or even a savings account. Because what a good financial advisor is going to do is look at all that and say, how does this interact with each other? And how does it interact with your values as a family? Because again, if you really value legacy type money, then Social Security is going to be a little bit less attractive as a type of money because it's going to stop after you pass, after your spouse passes. You also have to think about preserving your account, right? Because Social Security is never going to go away, but your other accounts could go away. And so they need to be playing off of each other to sustain you throughout not only your long life, but inflation throughout your long life, which is going to raise costs. We would encourage you to work with a financial professional because when we meet with people, it's no charge to you. If you can get a second opinion from a professional, great. Why wouldn't you? That's only going to help you. And if you don't like it, you don't like the recommendation, you can walk away and do something else, but hopefully you'll get some insight, right? Hopefully there's something there that helps you and improves your situation. We like to just be very clear with what it looks like if you were to work with us, because we know a lot of times as a result of this, families start saying, hey, we didn't think about X or we didn't think about Y. We thought we had a big plan ready to go, but now that you mentioned, generational wealth or a divorce, in the past, and I might be eligible for that. Hey, we want to meet with somebody. The way that we work is we have a two meeting setup. The first meeting is a whole bunch of listening on our part. We want to get to know you, understand what's important to you. And again, assess where you are versus where you want to be. I always call it a snapshot of where are you right now? And then what is your dream of what you're wanting to get to? And if we can do something to connect the dots to make that pathway smoother for you or more clear for you, great, then we've done a good job. But that first meeting is a whole lot of listening and note-taking. There's no recommendation. It's just gathering of information, getting to know you. Now, the second meeting, after we've had some time to digest, run those mathematical formulas to see, you know, should you take it at 62? Should you take it at 66? Should you take it at 70? Then in a second meeting, we come back and we either implement the strategy, or if there's something that you say, hey, that's close to where I want it to be, but it's not quite what I want it to be, then we would tweak it and make sure that it's right for you. Here's some disclosures. Part of our team, like I said, we do these presentations every month on a different topic. So we've got a rotation of who likes to do certain presentations based on what they enjoy talking about. So here's some of our other team members, and you might see them in a future month. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing for a moment. A lot of times there's questions. If it's a confidential question, you don't have to ask it here. We can follow up. You can reach out to us. If it's a general question, I'd be happy to either answer it or get you an answer. We have a question from somebody that says, my husband is 6 years older than me. How will that impact when he starts Social Security? It's a good question. I want to make sure that I understand what you're asking. So number one, he's going to have his own record. He doesn't really have to approach it in relation to you and your age. Obviously, there's a family planning dynamic, but it's going to be the same rules, 62 through 70, gradual increase over time, working versus not working, and the reduction. Now, part of the impact of that is something we didn't talk about today, which is Medicare eligibility, right? Because when you're 65 years old, you can get Medicare. That can come out of Social Security. If you're taking Social Security early at 62, you're not going to get Medicare. You're going to be either working somewhere, getting medical coverage that way, or you're going to be paying for health insurance out of pocket, which is obviously a huge financial consideration if you're going to go that route. So if he's thinking of retiring first, I don't know your situation, but let's say he's retiring at 62 and you're going to be, 56 at that point. Well, hopefully he can go on your insurance. Because otherwise, if he can't, then he's going to be paying out of pocket. In terms of your relation to taking the spousal benefit, though, it still works the same way. You're eligible for 50%, but if you take it early, and especially if he takes it early, there's going to be that reduction. I hope that answered your question. It's kind of a broad question. It's a good question, but I want to make sure that we narrow it down, to specifically answer what you were asking. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions come in. If somebody thinks of something later on tonight or tomorrow or a year from now, reach out to us. We're happy to talk through it with you. Otherwise, thank you for joining. Thank you for taking part of your evening. I'll let you guys go. Enjoy the rest of your night. If you're interested in next month, we'll send out invites for that, or just reach out to us and we'll do something educational next month as well. Have a good night, and I'll talk to you guys soon.